Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about both of the majors that happened this weekend. In Japan, you're going to have Maesuma Top 15 Final, and in Europe, you're going to have Ultimate Fighting Arena 2023. And we're going to be starting it with Maesuma. Our top 16 finishers are going to be Senra, Goroka, Gakt, and Jogabu in 13th. Kome, Hito, Masa, and Navy in 9th. In 7th place, you're going to have Alice and Doramiki. 5th place is Shiryuki and Toraguri. 4th place is Snow. 3rd place is Level 1. 2nd place is Yoshidora. And winning the entire thing was Mia. Now, Maesuma was the tournament where the low tiers just popped off. Obviously, you're going to have Toraguri in the top 8, and we'll get to him in just a second. But in 33rd, you're going to have Lax, Ball, and YN. You're going to have Lax on the Crom, and the Sora came out and did a little bit of work this tournament, but obviously the Crom is going to be the highlight for us. You're going to have YN with a massive upset over Noi with Zelda. YN has been doing some really impressive stuff with this character. I would probably regard him as the best Zelda in the world at this point because there's not a ton of action happening with Zelda in general. Then you're going to have Ball with a really nice run to 33rd on K Rule with wins over Yoshi, Akasa, and MCK. Just super impressive for him. K Rule's not a character you see super often, but he does have some potential. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to tell you guys that K Rule is a good character, but he is a heavy. He does hit extremely hard, and you're able to steal some games pretty early on. And then you're going to have Tora in 25th with Solo Ike getting wins over Gakt and Harrison. Now, if y'all watch this channel, you know I think very little of Ike. I have this character in my bottom 5. He does still have some decent matchups, though, like Ness, for example, and Tora was able to capitalize then, so massive props to him for this run. I didn't have Senra's run initially with the other low-tier players, but Puff is definitely on the lower end of the cast, so I'm just going to throw it in right now. And he was able to pick up wins on Saboton, Rarikun, and Subo on his way to 13th place, so both of the best Puff players in the world ended up getting 13th. It's really interesting to see who's actually going to take that title of the #1 Jigglypuff, because Senra and Base Mage have been neck and neck. They've both been doing some really incredible things, and I'm very interested to see who's going to end up winning that one out. And in Group Block, I forgot to mention yet another low-tier player, and they did use a multitude of characters this tournament, but I still want to highlight them. That's going to be Goryoka, who ended up getting 13th place, and his low tier is going to be Mewtwo, which is pretty surprising to me. Mewtwo is probably the least common character at the top level of Smash Ultimate, and the amount of Mewtwo's you see, you think he's the worst character in the game. I can name more Ganon players than I can name Mewtwo players, and to be fair, it's not like I'm explicitly looking for Mewtwo, but he's just not super common, and it's always nice to see him come out because the character has some super interesting stuff about it, and Goryoka was able to pick up wins on both Doramiki and Shion this weekend, and as I mentioned, he used a multitude of characters, but the Mewtwo definitely did do a little bit of work, and honestly, this is probably Mewtwo's best placement of the entire year. And we also got to talk about a couple of the underperformances. You're going to have both Noi and Osimo finishing at 49th. Noi's going to lose to YN and Borden. And even when Noi's not playing Pokemon Trainer, I always view him as a PT player, and I'm almost always rooting for the PT player. But it was nice to see Borden take that one because I'm also just a Terry fan. So two characters that I like facing off against each other. You really can't complain. It's just good Smash. You're also going to have Osimo at 49th, like I mentioned, losing to Lunamato. Speaking of characters that I like, you're going to have Lunamato on the Mii Brawler. This is probably the best win a Mii Brawler player has gotten in Smash Ultimate, and Lunamato has beaten Osimo before, but I don't believe it was at a major. Actually, maybe that one time that Bloom pulled out the Brawler got a couple of good wins, it counts, but in terms of solo-made Brawlers, I would definitely say this is the highest win. You're also going to have Suna knocking out Osimo in the loser side. Young Link just did super well this weekend, or rather, Toon Link did super well this weekend, and we'll get to that when we're actually within the top 8. You're going to have Rizziasu at 33rd, losing to Masha and Suna. Again, Suna getting 25th, beating both Osimo and Rizziasu is very impressive. And then finally, you're going to have Kananabe and Tsubaki both bowing out at 17th place. Tsubaki's going to end up losing to Alice and Gakt, and Kananabe is going to end up losing to Snow and Doramigi. Now, these placements definitely are a little bit unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world. I'd say the player that's affected the most is definitely Osimo, because he's a player that I could honestly see still being top 15 by the end of the year, but with a placement like this is definitely going to hurt him. He's still an amazing player, obviously, and I would expect him to bounce back at his next tournament. I would expect all these guys to bounce back in the next tournaments because they're all incredible, but it does suck to underperform. And before we get into the top 8, there's two losers ones that I want to highlight, and they're going to be from Navy and Gakt. You're going to have Navy losing to Avaru, then beating Shori, Gam. Yuzu ends up DQing, then he beats Ryuo, Masha, and Senra before losing to Alice. And this is the best Luigi run of the weekend, as Luigi ends up getting 13th place at UFA. And the conversation for best Luigi in the world is such a tough one because most Luigi players are fairly inconsistent just because the character is naturally inconsistent. But whenever a Luigi player has a high like this, we definitely have to commemorate it. And And if Navy's able to do this a couple more times in a row, I could definitely see him being slotted into that conversation for the best Luigi in the world. It should also be noted that he has a Byleth secondary. I don't know how much work it put in this bracket. Luigi definitely put in a majority of the work, though, but just thought I should mention that. Regardless, though, shoutouts to Navy for the run. Super impressive from him. Then you're going to have Gact as well, as we mentioned earlier on. He's going to end up losing to Tora in a really good Game 5 set. Then he ends up beating Monado, Rarakusu, Showers, Nietono, and Tsubaki on his way to 13th place before he ends up losing to Doramigi. Just a really nice run from Gact. And I feel the same way about Gact the way I used to feel about Zamba. His neutral and fundamentals are so insanely good, but once he starts doing the touch of death crazy nest combos, I really feel like Gact has the potential to be like a top 10 player in this game because fundamentally he is just so solid. But if he starts doing the nest boy 12 combos, it is over for everyone. So let's get into the top 8. Our 7th place finishers are going to be Alice and Doramigi. And Roy's been having a little bit of a resurgence these past couple months. Alice was able to pick up wins on Hamazu, Tsubaki, and Navy. You're also going to have Flo top 8 in UFA. You're going to have Kolo doing super well at all the recent events he's been going to. Roy in 2023 hasn't been super great, especially in contrast to 2022. But these past couple months, it really seems like he's starting to pick up on the results again. And it's thanks to players like Alice, who is the best Roy in Japan. Like, it's not even close. One of the best Roys in the entire world, and this is just another super solid run from him. Speaking of solid runs, you got Doramigi with a really nice losers run, as we mentioned earlier on. He ends up getting upset by Goroka, but he's able to pick up wins on MCK, Daigura, Tora, Kananabe, Gact, and Hiro to be able to get into the top 8. And Doramigi is a player that I have very high hopes of. We saw that greatness at Maesuma. I believe it was 13 where he popped up super hard, had to run to second place, and he's just been slowly getting back to that form, slowly returning to the top of Smash Ultimate. It really feels like every single tournament that he goes to, he's getting closer and closer to that peak, and I do think that he's going to reach that peak again and be one of the scariest players in this game. I mean, he already is. I would already say that he is the best mid in the world just because Proto Bonham has taken a step back, and also this guy is just insane, but I think he's got a super bright future. In 5th place, you're going to have Shiryuki and Toraguri. At the start of the video, when I said low tiers were doing well at this tournament, I was not kidding. Shiryuki's able to pick up wins on Tora, Goryoka, and Kome. And I don't know if I would call Shiryuki the best Inkling in the world. He's definitely in the conversation between him and the other 2 Japanese Inklings and Levi and Showers. But this is a really nice high from him. I think this is his best placement of the year. Not his best placement of all time, because Shiryuki's had some pretty incredible highs. He's just a super talented player, and it's always nice to see him doing well at events. Toraguri, though, I don't know how this guy pulls it off. He is just so talented. He's able to get wins on Torie, Jogabu, Kome, and Doramigi with solo Banjo-Kazooie. His second top 8 at a major event. Last time he got 7th place. This time he got 5th place. Next time he's going to get 4th place, and eventually we're going to have Banjo win a major. And it's crazy that that's a possibility. In 4th place, you're going to have Snow. 3rd place, level 1. Snow's able to pick up wins on Shion, Kananabe, Alice, and Toraguri. And we got to start having the conversation for who the best Mario in the world is, because I think Snow has a serious shot at taking that title. He's going to outplace Kurama at their respective events. Kurama still gets a really nice 9th place at UFA, though, so it's not like Kurama's been doing bad at events, but Snow's just got a lot of really high peaks, and he's overall just such a talented player. Definitely the best Mario in Japan at this point. It's not even a question. Now it's still really good, but Snow is just insane, and this is just another really nice performance from him. Level 1 as well. As I mentioned, Toon Link's doing super well. Not out of nowhere from level 1, but this is such a good run. It's able to pick up wins on Vanilla, Karage, Subo, Hiro, and Shiryuki, and it's really got me rethinking what I think about Toon Link as a character, because he isn't bad by any means, but I just don't think he's as good as the other top tiers. But some of the stuff that level 1 is pulling off is pretty incredible. I could see this character maybe being towards the high tier. I mean, what can I say? Level 1 is just giving me faith in a character that you would never expect. And our grand finalists are the top 2 seeds, not super surprising there, Yoshidora and Mia. Yoshidora's path was a little bit more dramatic, though, picking up wins on Sumasuto and Nietono before losing to Kome. Now, it's not crazy that he lost to Kome. The record was 4-4 prior to this, but still, massive props to Kome for being able to pull off that upset. Then, in the loser side, he's able to beat Fura, Goryoka, Masa, Alice, Shiryuki, Snow, and level 1, and again, it's not really a shock. He's the 2nd seed. He's a top 10 player in the world. One of the best to do it. And speaking of the best to do it, you got Mia winning the entire event with wins over Kuroponzo, Toroguri, Masa, Snow, level 1, and Yoshidora. Mia is just so impressive. And it's gotten to the point where I'm seriously considering him as the best player in the world. Now, I don't think that he's going to be ranked the best player in the world, but when we're talking right now in terms of form, who do I think is going to win an event? I would probably be putting my money on Mia. This guy is just so impressive, and even though there's a couple top players that I would still favor versus him, like I'd still favor Spargo to take it, I'd still favor Sonic to take it until they have a couple more sets. Mia is just so impressive, and he's constantly getting better, as was the player with the most major wins of the entire year, even more than Akala, which is super impressive. So yeah, Mia is just ludicrous. On to our next major, and if there's anyone I left out from the previous major or from this major and you want to know how their run was, just leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to tell you. And for our top 16 finishers, we're going to have Lugi, Lancelot, Base Mage, and Nader Yu in 13th. Kurama, Crepsalade, Bloom Forever, and Rarkiller in 9th. In 7th, you're going to have MK Big Boss and Tarek. 5th is Flo and T. 4th is MK Leo. 3rd is Raflo. 2nd is Siski. And winning the entire thing is Gluttony. And just like Maesuma, you had a lot of low-tier heroes absolutely pop off at this event. Not as many in the top 8, but still a bunch from performing. You're going to have Mezcal, who ends up getting 17th place, with wins over Homika and Spectral, only losing to MK Big Boss and Crepsolite. I would say that Mezcal is the best Ridley in the world, and I know that's not a super heavily contested title, but still, this guy is incredibly impressive, and to get 17th place with Ridley at a major in 2023 is pretty absurd. Speaking of absurdity, you got Major, who ends up getting 33rd place with Ganon, which is just insane. Like, to do that at any point in Smash Ultimate is pretty impressive, aside from, like, the first week, I guess, but to do it in 2023 is just, like, insane. You have to be better than literally every single opponent that you're beating, and Major was better than a lot of people this weekend, so massive props to him for that. You're going to have Winder, or Winder, not super sure you say that, but he's going to be on the Dr. Mario, picking up wins on Homika, Dr. Miro, and Ryu Kai on his run to 33rd, only losing to Nitox and T, and he took T to Game 5, may I add, with Dr. Mario, which is pretty absurd. Dr. Mario's a super weird low tier because he just hits so insanely hard that when you're getting juggled by him or when you're in the disadvantage versus him, he does not feel like a low tier. All the other contexts, he feels like a low tier, but this character hits like a truck. And then finally, you're going to have Lancelot, who ends up getting 13th with a combination of Roy and Chrom, but Chrom's obviously going to be a we care about. He's going to pick up wins on Spectral, Back, M-Popo, and Leon, the EU Leon. Of course, only losing to Siski and MK Big Boss. As I mentioned earlier on in the video, and as I'll mention again when we talk about Flo, Roy is making a little bit of a comeback, and maybe we'll see Chrom do the same thing. And these next handful of players aren't playing low tiers per chance, but I definitely think that their characters are on the lower half of the cast, and I wanted to highlight them, so this is a good time to do it. You're going to have M-Popo with a really nice lose run, winning 5 sets in a row, including wins over players like Dan Pushy, Case, and most notably Orion, only losing to Pew and Lancelot. It's always nice to see a Rosalina player do super well that isn't the Buzz, and that's not even a shout out to Buzz, but he just does super well all the time, so it's nothing special anymore. When DeBuzz is playing Rosalina, that character looks like top 10, and Rosa is a very tough character for me to grapple with because I genuinely have no idea how good she is. Is it just a Buzz doing crazy things, or is it players like Solo, like M-Popo, getting some really solid results with her? I'm very curious to see what the meta unfolds like for Rosalina, because she's also just a very hard character, so I think we'll see her making a little bit more of an appearance in the late game, like we're kind of starting to see. You're going to have Nitox as well on the Lucas. I'd say that Nitox is the best Lucas in the world, though again, I don't know a ton of Lucas players, so I could be wrong about that, but he was able to pick up wins on Venom, Winder, and Quick. That Quick win is super impressive, only to Kurama and MK Big Boss. Lucas has such a high ceiling, in my opinion. The snake stuff that you can do with this character is absolutely incredible, and I'm very curious to see kind of how his meta unfolds in the future. Then you're going to have Base Mage as well. I mentioned Center earlier on. His counterpart is going to pick up wins on Yusef, Trim, and Etish. I'll talk about Etish in just second, only losing to Gluttony and MK Leo, taking both players to Game 5, which is pretty absurd. Base Mage is so good at this game, and he is so close to being at that super top level. Like, right now, he's a top level player, top 50 in the world, arguably. I feel like he's 1 or 2 solid wins into getting into a top 8, and to just snowballing all that momentum and being one of the best in the world with Jigglypuff, which is pretty insane that he's able to pull that off. But I'm very curious to see what this guy's future unfolds, because I think he could do some pretty incredible things, and he's already been doing some pretty incredible things. Speaking of incredible, our final player that I want to highlight here is going to be Nader Yu. He also got 13th place with wins on Longo, MK Leo, and Modside. That Leo win is obviously going to be the main one. And Leo used all Lucina for that set, which I'm pretty curious about. We'll talk about that when we're talking about Leo. But considering that Nader Yu got 3-0'd by the Meta Knight last time he played Leo, this is a massive improvement, and he should be super proud of it. So this next player, I didn't really have a segment for, and I still wanted to highlight them, and that's going to be Edish or Edish, not super sure how you say that, but regardless, at the 70th seed, they were able to get 17th place with wins over Zemel, NS, Clement, and Aiken, and I know the rest of Europe is thanking Edish so much right now, because Aiken has been an absolute menace whenever he's been at European events, so shout out to Edish for taking him out. And for our next four players, it was a similar situation where I didn't really have a way to kind of segue them all together until I realized they all ended up getting 9th place. So that's convenient for me. They're going to be Karama, Bloom Forever, Rarkor, and Krepsale. Starting off with Karama, ends up getting wins on Pew, Nitox, and Krepsale, only losing to Siski and MK Big Boss. It is an underperformance from him, and that's yet another time he's lost to a Raw player. He lost his last encounter versus Zomba. He's lost his last 3 encounters versus MK Big Boss, and at Port Priority, he ended up dropping a set to Anathema, and that's a matchup that I think Mario does pretty well into, so Karama probably going to need to invest a little bit of time trying to figure out that Raw matchup. Maybe he pulls out another character because he's just not comfortable in it with Mario, and I do think that Karama can figure it out, and honestly, I don't think Karama's 2023 season reflects how good he is as a player. I think this guy is simply incredible, and it's not like he has bad results. He has so many really good results. Like, he's got a 9th at Rise of Grind, 9th at Luminosity Make Moves, 9th at UFA, but it's a lot of 9th places. I think the second Karama starts getting into these top 8s, it's not like he doesn't have top 8s, but once he's consistently getting into more of these top 8s, I think we're really going to see how good this guy is, because he just is insane. Next up, you're going to have Bloom Forever, who had an absolutely monstrous losers run after losing to NS super early on. He ends up winning 8 sets in a row, including wins over players like Blue 10X, who he beat twice, by the way. So Blue 10X got 129 by being double eliminated by Bloom, and I might be butchering that pronunciation. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your pronunciation, and I'm also sorry that you had to play Bloom twice for 129. That's just a little bit unlucky. You also have to play Polo Chan, Polynomius, Shanique, Grim, Andres Event, Super Semi, and Nader U before losing to Tarek in a Game 5 set. And I don't know if Bloom Forever's results really reflect how good he is. It's a very similar situation to Karama. This guy hasn't had too many opportunities to prove himself, and I'm very curious to see how he does at Washington because I still think he could absolutely dominate that event, but we're just going to have to wait and see. You're going to have Rarkar, who also gets 9th place with wins over Polynomius, Mr. R, and Nader U, only losing to Flo and NK Leo, and it was pretty much just sort at this event. He did bring out the Greninja versus Leo, and that was the only game that he ended up taking, but the rest of it was Sora, and on hit, this guy is the best Sora in the world. Like, it is not even a question. At least up the top level Soras, he's able to do some pretty crazy conversions. And I would still say Kamei is the best Sora, but that's just because Kamei is one of the best people to ever touch this game. But if Rarkar is able to reach his level, his on-hit stuff is just ludicrous. And I think he could be one of the best in the world. I mean, he already is, but I'm talking like top 20, top 10 caliber. I have very, very high hopes for this player, and I'm very curious to see how his career unfolds. Speaking of an interesting career, you have Krepsale, another person with so much talent. He's going to be using that combination of Steve and Wario, able to pick up wins on Deoxys, Mezcal, and Lugi, only losing to Karama and Raflo. And sorry, my mic cut out there, but basically all that I was saying is Krepsale is of that new age of European players who are actually playing when Europe is a goated region. Like, prior to this, Europe has just been okay at Smash, but now you have players like Raflo, like Krepsale, who are being brought up with some of the best players in the world, and you can see their talent levels spiking immediately because of that. They have very bright futures ahead of them. And before we get into the top 8, I really quickly just wanted to give a shout out to Inspector Gerard, who ended up beating Andres FN with Duck Hunt, which is pretty insane, as well as Fox 2, who ended up beating Quick. Let's get right into this top 8. Our 7th place finishers are going to be Tarek and MK Big Boss. Tarek picking up wins on Z, Mod's Eye, Smock, and Bloom Forever, only losing to Glutony, and MK Leo taking both players to Game 5, and it's already impressive to take players of that caliber to Game 5, but for Glutony specifically, Tarek has had 6 sets versus Gluto, and before this, he has taken 1 game. He doubled the amount of games that he has taken versus Glutony, which is just massive progress, and I've just been so impressed by Tarek this year. I know I've said it a lot, but I'm going to keep saying it because every single tournament, he shows himself up. He's just getting better and better, and he's somehow making me have faith in Greninja, which I didn't think anyone would be able to do, but just massive props to Tarek. He's just such a phenomenal player, and MK Big Boss as well, getting another top 8 this year. We saw him get a top 8 right at the start of the year in Let's Make Big Moves, and he's been struggling a little bit since then. It's not like his results have been bad by any means, but this is another outstanding performance from him with wins on Momon, Mezcal, Nitox, Lancelot, and Kurama. That Kurama win is especially impressive because it's a hard matchup for Rob, and Kurama is just insane in this game. He only ends up dropping sets to Raflo. In 5th place, you're going to have Flo and T, starting off with Flo picking up wins on Hayden, Itesh, Super Semi, and Rarkyor, only losing to Gluttony and Raflo, and that's 2 majors in a row where Flo's looked really good. Kaguribi 11 farmed that event, now he's going to UFA, he's farming this event. It seems like Roy is making the comeback. You have so many Roy players getting into the top 8s of these majors in the latter half of 2023, and I already talked about this a lot when I was talking about Alice, so I won't spend too much time on it, but basically, massive props to Flo, and also, he brought out the Toon Link in the top 8, so that's another Toon Link who top 8'd a major this weekend. You're going to have T in 5th place as well, picking up wins on Winder or Winder, Maze Bean, Leon, and Raflo, only losing to Siski and MK Leo. Now, technically, this is a pretty big underperformance because T was the first seed of the event, but I don't think he should have been the first seed, and I think this is a pretty solid spot for him. He's been going a little bit up and down these past couple of months, like he's got 17th places at Kaguribi 10, 13th at Crown the 3rd, Maesuma top 13, Port Priority. He also just hasn't been going to as much stuff, and he also has really good placements, like 4th place at Kaguribi 11, so T season has been all over the place, and these are the kind of placements that you need to be able to solidify yourself in the top 15, in the top 10, which is what T should be shooting for, because even though he hasn't been as good as he was in 2022, this guy is still ludicrously good at this game. In 4th place, you're going to have Leo. 3rd place, Raflo. Leo, pretty nice lose run from him after losing to Nader U. He's able to pick up wins on Solo, Mr. R, Smock, Base Mage, Rarkyor, Tarek, and T before losing to Raflo. And he was playing a multitude of characters at this tournament. He used Lucina, he used Aegis, but a majority of the time he was going to be using a combination of Joker Byleth, which I do think is a pretty solid combination. Honestly, whatever combo Leo's willing to invest time into is the one that he should be going with, because I think this guy can make pretty much any character work, and it was nice to see him break his streak of underperformances. Like, technically this was an underperformance because he was the 3rd seed and he didn't get top 3, but also it's 4th at a major, and prior to this he had 17th at Rise and Grind and Port and a 13th at Luminosity Make Moves, so it's got to be nice to be able to break that streak of just not really good placement, and I think we're going to start seeing Leo getting back on the right track, because even though, yeah, Leo's washed, he's bad, yada yada yada, this guy's still one of the best players to ever touch this game, and I don't think 1 or 2 bad placements is going to change that. Though I have to commemorate Europe, because prior to this, MK Leo had only ever lost to 1 European, which is going to be Gluttony. Now he's lost to 3 Europeans in Nader U, and our 3rd place finisher, Raflo, who's also able to pick up wins on Back, Mukuro, MK Big Boss, Krebs LA, MK Big Boss again, and Flo, and then only drop sets to T and Siski. Raflo is so insanely good at this game. He is one of the hidden gems of Europe. I need to see this guy go into more events, because I honestly think he's probably the best Palutena player in the world, and it's really tough for me to say that because Jagaimo is insanely good, and then whenever Luis is at his peak or Yuno's at his peak, they're also insane, but Raflo is just such an impressive player, and I just need to see more of him. And our grand finalists are the European duo. Even though they're not from the same country, I'm still making them a duo, and that's going to be Siski and Gluttony. Siski picking up wins on Susu, Lancelot, Lugi, Karama, T, and Raflo, only losing to Gluttony twice. And I didn't really mention this at any other point in the video, but shouts to Susu because they were actually doing the insane Steve tech that the rest of these Steve players should be doing. But back to Siski, is he the best Samus in the world? It's honestly kind of tough to tell just because him and Yara don't have too many overlapping events, but when they're playing at their best, both of those players are so impressive. And if you want to call Siski the best, I think that's absolutely fine. And also shouts to Siski for bouncing back after his subpar performance at Port Priority, ends up getting 25th there. Didn't let that slow him down at all. And neither did Gluttony, who also underperformed at Port Priority. His only bad placement of the year, where he ends up getting 17th place and didn't miss a beat, wins this event, no sets dropped, beating Soul Arts, Neroz, Base Mage, Tarek, Flo, and 6 O's Siski, and technically this was an overperformance because Gluto was the 2nd seed, but he definitely should have been the 1st seed of this event. I could see Gluttony being the best player in the world, honestly, at any time now. His adaptation is by far the best in the world, and the more that you're playing players like Aquila, like Mia, like Sonics, the better he's going to do, even if those matchups are struggling. I really believe he can overcome anything, and as Europe's been getting better as a region, Gluttony has been getting better with them, and it's just so sick to see, and I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The support has been absolutely unreal. If there's anyone I left out, anything I got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.